Hello booktube, and welcome to another Better Read Saul video. The first in just over a year, in fact. I don't really have much to say about that other than I'm kind of awful. So hopefully this relaunch goes well and I stick with it better and you continue to bear with me, or start bearing with me a bit if you're just joining the channel. Hi! The book I've chosen to mark my hopefully triumphant return with is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. Now there's a bit of irony to this choice, and hopefully not in the Alanis Morissette sense of the word, as the fifth season, which was the first in her multiple Hugo Award winning Broken Earth trilogy, was actually the first book I did a review video on here on booktube. I will try and make a link or something to that for you to watch if you haven't seen already, or just refresh yourself as to my thoughts. So this is the start to her new trilogy, which is an urban modern fantasy in contrast to the post-apocalyptic dystopian sort of science fantasy of the Broken Earth trilogy. It's actually based on a short story she did a couple years ago called The City Born Great, which was published on Tor.com and may still be there, but please don't quote me on that. Otherwise, it is in her How Long Till Black Future Month collection, which I've also been reading this month, if you want to check it out and see it. It does work as the prologue to the book, so you won't have missed anything, though there are a couple minor changes. So this is inspired, isn't really the right word, and I'm not entirely sure if influenced is either, but it draws from and deals with a lot of the work of H.P. Lovecraft, who is famous for the Cthulhu mythos, which I found out about back in high school and just fell in love. Cosmic horror and Eldritch abominations have really been my jam ever since. But here's the rub. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was a racist. And not just in the sort of casual way that most people were at the turn of the 20th century. Oh no. No. The man was obscenely racist. And that's something that the SFF community has been dealing with, particularly in the last couple years. I know there's been a few other efforts by writers of color to sort of wrestle with this history of the subgenre, such as Victor LaValle's Ballad of Black Tom, which I read a little earlier this year and would highly recommend. So the concept of this story is that cities, once they reach a certain level of maturation, which means population, history, definitely culture, and such, sort of awaken into the interplanetary beings, and they end up choosing humans to act as their avatar, to sort of carry out their will and protect the city and its citizens, particularly from something called the enemy, which is sort of a traditional Eldritch abomination, though not really. Anyway, this takes place entirely in New York, which is the first North American city to successfully undergo this process. I say successfully, although something does go wrong, as the power is just too much for one person to handle, as the city's just too big, too many people, etc. And as such, it has to be sort of divided amongst the 5 boroughs that make up the city of New York. And the enemy is just acting in ways it never has against cities before. It's much more smarter, really, Saul? Anyway, and basically these newly awakened borough avatars have to figure out what's going on with them and the city. The characters that make up the cast in this book are all pretty interesting. They're very questionable at times, which I don't mind in my fantasy, but I enjoyed them quite a bit. They're pretty much all characters of color and some form of queer. There's even a senior woman character who's quite badass, which is not something you see enough of in fantasy. I also appreciated that Jemisin went with more of a Nyarlathotep approach to the enemy in humanizing her, or rather giving her an anthropomorphization version, rather than, say, Cthulhu, who just typically sleeps and occasionally wakes up and sort of unintentionally wrecks shit. Also calling her the woman in white, while it also plays with the themes of the book, was a nice call out to the King in Yellow from the Cthulhu mythos. Well, I did like the characters. A few of the arcs didn't really land for me that well. I felt there was a little too much focus on their interaction with their powers and the city rather than interpersonal interactions, which I'm generally more interested in. Like, take Brooklyn. Now, that is one character I could not really connect to. I tried. Maybe if I end up in New York, I'm just not a Brooklyn sort of person. But I felt that Jemisin focused more on what she was rather than who she was, which didn't really work for me. Now, as we sort of come to expect from Jemisin, one doesn't win 3 Hugos by accident after all. This is intricately well written with a very poetic sense of writing. Some of the description is just fantastic and mind-blowing, particularly of the way the city powers work and what they are. I have seen some people say that the prose is maybe a little purpley, and I sort of agree with that take. Now, there is no second person, which I'm kind of thankful for, though I did grow to get used to and even enjoy it in her last trilogy. Now, the themes of racism, sexism, homophobia, general oppression, gentrification, all such are major themes in the city we became, just as much as they were in the 5th season and its follow-up books in the series. That said, I don't think they're as seamlessly woven into the narrative here. They certainly aren't subtle, which they often aren't in real life, so it didn't particularly bother me. That said, it could be a bit heavy-handed at times, and that took me out of the narrative. Like, there's one scene where there's a bit of a tangent about 4chan and its culture, and I was just like, really, Nora? So while I do have a few critiques of the book, I did highly enjoy it and will definitely be looking forward to the next 2 in the Great Cities trilogy. I would give this a 4.2, 4.3 out of 5. So that does it for my review of The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, and pretty much the end of this video. So I will see you in 2021. Kidding, of course, although, like, pretty much everyone, I wouldn't totally mind skipping the last half of this year. Please do give me your thoughts on the book if you've happened to read The City We've Become, or just this video in general. Hopefully I will be seeing you around. Please do leave the video a like if you enjoyed it, and a subscription would be greatly appreciated. I will see you around next time.